This is Psalm 68, verses 1 through 6, and verses 33 through 35. For the last few weeks, we've been following the Revised Common Lectionary and following the readings from the Psalms over these weeks. So these are not always chapters or verses that we get to in the church calendar, but this is a great dive this summer, this spring and summer, into these Psalms. This is a Psalm of David. Rise up, O God, and scatter your enemies. Let those who hate God run for their lives. Blow them away like smoke. Melt them like wax in a fire. Let the wicked perish in the presence of God, but let the godly rejoice. Let them be glad in God's presence. Let them be filled with joy. Sing praises to God and to his name. Sing loud praises to him who rides the clouds. His name is the Lord. Rejoice in his presence. Father to the fatherless, defender of widows, this is God, whose dwelling is holy. God places the lonely in families. He sets the prisoners free and gives them joy. But he makes the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. Sing to the one who rides across the ancient heavens, his mighty voice thundering from the sky. Tell everyone about God's power. His majesty shines down on Israel. His strength is mighty in the heavens. God is awesome in his sanctuary. The God of Israel gives power and strength to his people. The word of God for the people of God. Yippee-i-oh, yippee-i-ay, ghost riders in the sky. An old cowboy went riding out one dark and windy day. Upon a ridge he rested as he went along his way. When all at once a mighty herd of red-eyed cows he saw plowing through the ragged skies and up a cloudy draw. Their brands were still on fire and their hooves were made of steel. Their horns were black and shiny and their hot breath he could feel. But a fear went through him as they thundered through the sky. He saw the riders coming hard and he heard their mournful cry. Yippee-i-oh, ghost riders in the sky. Faces gaunt, their eyes were blurred, their shirts all soaked with sweat. Riding hard to catch that herd, but they ain't caught 'em yet. They've got to ride forever on that range up in the sky, on horses snorting fire. Hear their mournful cry. Yippee-i-oh, yippee-i-ay, ghost riders in the sky. riders loped on by him, he heard one call his name. If you want to save your soul from hell, riding on our range. Cowboy, change your ways today, or with us you will ride, trying to catch the devil's herd across the endless sky. Yippee-yi-oh, yippee-yi-yay. Ghost riders in the sky. Yippee-yi-oh, yippee-yi-yay. Ghost riders in the sky. Ghost riders in the sky. Ghost riders in the sky. All hat and no cattle. That is a classic idiom of the American West. It describes someone who might be a big talker, but has little bona fide action to back up the words. It can also describe a person who is mostly show. They look good, they play the part, but it's only a part. He or she has no real substance. But the best use of the idiom is when it is employed to describe an obvious fraud, a fake. You've seen him. Nice, starched, boot-cut Wrangler jeans, Tony Lama boots shining like new money, gaudy, gigantic belt buckle that could double as a cafeteria tray if he just tilted it forward, pearl snap shirt, freshly pressed, Stetson hat as big as a beach umbrella, but he ain't no cowboy. He's never shoveled horse manure one day in his life or mucked a stable. He's never stood in a cow pasture or had to run for his life from a bull or an overly protective heifer. He's never nursed saddle sores because he's likely never even been in a saddle. He doesn't know the difference between a salt lick or sweet feed. He smells of Armani and Polo, not leather and sweat. He listens to Morgan Wallen and Jelly Roll instead of George Jones and Merle Haggard. He drinks White Claw, not rye whiskey. Come on. All hat, no cattle. Well, let me tell you today about the real deal. Maybe the last great cowboy of the American West. His name was Stan Jones. Stanley Davis Jones. Jones was born in 1914 on a working ranch in Cochise County, Arizona, on the Mexican border. He was put on a horse to ride before he could even walk. And he spent his earliest years traipsing all over the deserts and canyons of the Southwest, wrangling cows and rodeoing town to town. His father died suddenly when Stan was a teenager. His older siblings having already left home, his mother moved with him to Los Angeles, California. After high school, he graduated from Berkeley with bachelor and master's degrees in zoology because he loved the animal and the plant life of the American West. He joined the U.S. Navy, was honorably discharged after his service, came back to California, took a back-breaking job in a copper mine, then moved on to become a firefighter. And finally, he was accepted as a park ranger at a most beautiful location, the Death Valley National Park and Monument. He was back in the desert and back on horseback. Stan Jones's job was to safely guide tourists through that wilderness, to describe for them the fauna, the landscape, its history, its geology. And at night, he would take his little Martin guitar and sing to them old cowboy songs around the campfire. I mean, what a job. He had been doing this for several years when one morning his boss gave him a special assignment. There were some VIP tourists arriving from Los Angeles who needed expert assistance. It was some Hollywood big shot director and his leading man. They were looking for their next film location. They didn't know the desert. They weren't real cowboys. And so it was that Stan Jones became the personal guide and technical consultant to director John Ford and that leading man, John Wayne. Jones was so proficient, so much the real thing, that Ford hired him and took him back to Los Angeles. He continued his role as a Wild West consultant, but he rode so well he became a stunt double and an actor in a dozen different westerns. And he started singing those campfire songs for Hollywood producers and singing his own songs too, hundreds of them. He wrote a song called Cowpoke, a song called Cheyenne. He wrote the theme for The Searchers. And then Walt Disney hired him to write all the jingles and songs for the Mickey Mouse Club. But these are all minor accomplishments in light of the fact that Stanley Davis Jones composed the greatest Western song of all time, certified the greatest by any organization, person, or authority who can speak to the subject, the fastest selling and most successful musical recording in the history of the world up to that point, Ghost Riders in the Sky. Stan Jones recorded it, then Burl Ives, and then Vaughn Monroe, Bing Crosby, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Peggy Lee, the Sons of the Pioneers, Elvis Presley, Roy Clark, R.E.M., the Highwaymen. There are a couple of death metal covers out there if you would like to hear it. One by Kermit the Frog and the Muppets. And of course, a velvety rendition by Marty Robbins, whose version I love the most, and who recorded the second greatest Western song of all time, El Paso. But that's a story for another day. Stan Jones sat down on the front porch of his Death Valley Ranger cabin on his day off, a bright Sunday morning, and wrote Ghost Riders in the Sky in 10 minutes. The most lucrative and significant 10 minutes of his life. Stan's wife, Olive, explained the inspiration for the song as Stan died of cancer at a young age, only 49, and never heard the best and best-selling versions of the song by Johnny Cash and by Robbins. Stan was 12 years old. He had crossed over into Sonora, Mexico for a rodeo. He was camping on a hillside with some other older cowboys and one small family of Apache Indians, the native tribe of that land. They were all under the stars, a bright moon casting shadows on the clouds. This was 100 years ago. There was no such thing as light pollution to speak of. Beautiful. And the elder Apache, an ancient man, began to share the myth and the folklore of his people. And he pointed toward the Milky Way and he said, "These are not just stars. This is the pathway that the Creator left for us. It is the road one travels from this world to the next. When one reaches the end of the trail, it is a land of plenty. There is no death. There is no sickness. There is no starvation. There is no war. There is only peace. However, some souls get stuck along the way. their fear, their hatred, their resentment, their unresolved and unbalanced accounts keep them from completing their journey. They are doomed to ride the night skies until they can resolve their earthly lives. And native tribes call these beings kindi, soul-sick spirits who can't find their way home and who serve as a warning to the living to mind how we live our lives. And that's what you hear in Stan Jones's lyrics. Slide if you would, Garrett. Their faces gaunt, their eyes were blurred, their shirts all soaked with sweat. They're riding hard to catch that herd, but they ain't caught him yet. As the riders loped on by him, he heard one call his name. If you want to save your soul from hell or riding on our range, then cowboy, change your ways today, or with us you will ride, trying to catch the devil's herd across these endless skies. Cowboy poetry at its best. And Jones did something clever, supremely creative. He took the formative beliefs of these ancient people and adapted them for use in a more Christian context. We typically don't believe the Milky Way is a trail leading to the afterworld. We don't see soul-sick spirits in the clouds. But we do believe in the world to come. We do believe that how one leads his or her life determines quite a bit about the well-being of their soul. And some Christians even believe in a state of purgatory where we work out our fear, our hatred, our resentment, and our failures. The Far East calls this moksha or nirvana, the state one arrives at having cleansed themselves of all their negative karma. It is a common theme across all spiritualities. Stan Jones's masterful song is a creative expression of the same. But what, you might ask, has any of this got to do with Psalm 68? I know that question is tormenting you right now, and I have a response. What the Hebrew people did generally, and what David did specifically, is the same creative adaptation. They took the beliefs and the conclusions of a more ancient people and put them to use for themselves and for their own narrative in a storytelling song form. All the Psalms are songs to be sung. And just like Stanley Jones' use of the Apache, it involves riders in the sky. More accurately, God riding in the sky. Psalm 68 begins as a rallying cry. It's really a war cry. It is an appeal for the God of Israel. The people knew this God as Yahweh, to rise and crush their enemies. Blow them all away. Melt them like wax. Get after them. And then it moves to God's compassion and justice for His people. This God is a father to the fatherless, a parent to orphans, a defender of widows. This God takes in those who have no other place to go. This God frees the prisoners and strengthens the weak. This is a God who will set things right. The innocent will be protected. The vulnerable will be cared for. The wicked will get their just deserts. And then the question at hand. Twice in this psalm, verse 4 and verse 33, David speaks of that rider in the sky. Sing praises to God and to His name. Sing loud praises to Him who rides the clouds. Sing to the one who rides across the ancient heavens, His mighty voice thundering from the sky. This is the first use in the Old Testament of this verbiage to describe God. The Hebrew concept of God was always presence. I am. That's the name God revealed Himself as to Moses and to their ancestors. They thought of God as a holy fire. But God is a cloud rider, a rider on the storm, to invoke another great song by another great band, comes from outside the Hebrew tradition. This image comes from the Canaanites, from the Phoenicians, from the Syrians. Their God was not the burning, abiding Yahweh. Their God was the thundering, light bolt throwing deity known as Baal, or simply Baal. He was the original cloud rider. But David, with some liberties, takes that title away from him and gives it to Yahweh. David takes the stories he had heard from the ancients and incorporated them into the Hebrew story. He appropriates their images to use as his own. The Canaanite god, Baal, is referenced almost 100 times in the Old Testament. And for centuries, we didn't know much about this dude. God of the storm, a fertility god, the God who brought rain. That's all we really knew. That, and that He was Yahweh and the people of Israel's sworn enemy. And as it is in the Old Testament, often there was not a single concept of God. It's sort of all over the place. There were many gods and there were competitors vying for the devotion of the people. And Baal is Yahweh's chief rival. That much we knew. And then in 1928, outside of Aleppo in Syria, a magnificent discovery. I just said Syria, my iPad said Siri's trying to ask me a question back. Go away. Siri, I'm done. All right. In 1928, in Syria, I said it again. North of Israel, a magnificent discovery was made by archaeologist Claude Schaefer. It's called the Baal cycle. Garrett has placed it up here on the screen for you. It's written in an ancient text, carved into 6 clay tablets, 3 centuries before David. 300 years before David would write. And it tells the story of Baal as understood by the people of that time. And it cracked open an entirely new interpretation of much of the Old Testament. Baal was the great overcomer. By means of his perch high in the sky, he defeated all of his enemies by throwing lightning bolts and sending drowning rain and blinding fog and clouds and fulfilling this great desire he had to be the most powerful being in the universe. And part of that last tablet reads like this: Baal eyes the other gods to be annihilated. They are strong. Baal is stronger. How can anyone fight the mighty Baal? He will conquer all gods. He will overturn their power. He will break their rule. Place Baal high above all others, for he rides the clouds of his domination. So David has gone complete Stan Jones here and delivers a classic. He takes the verbiage, the image, the theology of an older story and makes it his own. He makes it speak about the true God, not some lesser deity that he would consider a fraud. Baal is all hat and no cattle. He's not real. He's a fake. He talks a big game, but he can't deliver. This is the meaning of Psalm 68. Yahweh overcomes. Others are strong. God is stronger. How can anyone fight the Almighty? He will conquer all gods. He will overturn their power. He will break their rule. Place God high above all others, for He rides the clouds of His domination. It's as clever and creative as Stan Jones taking an Apache story and turning it into an iconic anthem for the ages. And now this final question. So what? David borrows and adapts an ancient story for his own purposes and his own interpretation, does that have any bearing on us today? I really think it does. I was all in last week speaking about Psalm 66 on the subject of recovery, the story of James Taylor, the stories the ladies from Path of Grace brought with them. They were here last week. And just so you know, they never tell me when they're coming. And it seems like every time they show up that I could be leading a devotional for those ladies at their recovery house. If you don't know what Path of Grace is, it is a long-term, in-home, in-house rehabilitation center for those recovering from alcohol and drug abuses. And so when I saw them come in last week, not only was I terrified because I knew we didn't have enough communion bread, and my wife had already pointed it out to me, I was like shocked that they were going to be here on that particular day, like they were reading my sermon notes. But I want to go back to a little bit of that. I spoke last week about taking responsibility for your own life, that God is not the author of your punishments. Typically we are. And that's all basic to AA, to recovery, and to the 12-step movement. And it's also basic here, steps 2 and 3. Slide, if you would. We come to believe that only a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And by the way, this works for everybody, not just alcoholics. If you want to be spiritually and emotionally sober, if you would like some good boundaries in your life from people that just kind of suck the soul out of you, do you know those people? We come to believe that only a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And then this is the big one. We make the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. I absolutely love that last phrasing. Turn our will and our lives over to the care of the God of our understanding. And I get pummeled by people who don't like that phrase. Oh, the God of our understanding. Wow, that's just a God you create in your own mind. Harump, harump, harump. There is the real God, and then there is the God that you understand, but they can't be the same thing, you know. Or they say something like, God didn't ask your permission to exist. You can't make God to be what you want him or her or it to be. And this strikes me as completely disingenuous. Because none of us can know a God other than the God we understand. I'm going to say that again. None of us can know a God outside of the God that we understand. And our understanding of God changes over time. Sometimes it changes dramatically. But that's how it should be. Because a faith that does not develop, that does not grow, that does not adjust, that does not adapt, that isn't living faith. That's dogma. And it's as dead as a doornail. It's a little idol you can carry around in your pocket or hang from your rearview mirror. Here, and it's not recognized by casual reading of the text, David has done something remarkable. He has allowed his understanding of God to expand, to grow, to break the boundaries of what he used to know. And yes, he is using language and images and ancient stories and ideas outside the accepted nomenclature of his time. And it probably bothered some of his peers and his contemporaries. But the truth of it should not be diminished in any way. So I suppose my challenge to you today is this. Don't be afraid of the things that expand your understanding of God. If it makes God greater, more incredible, more mysterious, maybe it deserves a chance. Even if it's not your native language, so to speak, even if it challenges your long-held assumptions, if it leads you to the graciousness and goodness that David discovered, this God is, quoting again the psalm, a father to the fatherless, a parent to orphans, a defender of widows. This God takes in those who have no other place to go. This God frees the prisoners, strengthens the weak. This is a God who sets all things right. The innocent will be protected. The vulnerable will be cared for. The wicked will receive justice. That's a God worth and worthy of understanding better and as much as we can. Even if that understanding comes from unexpected places. I'll finish with Gerard Manley Hopkins. He was an English poet in the 1800s, innovator, painter, deeply committed to Christ. He became a Jesuit priest, college professor. He was always drawn to nature, to the beauty of the world. And he could also be very melancholy, depressed at times. But his last words on his deathbed, and he died at only 42 years of age, his last words on his deathbed were, "I am so happy. I am so happy." That happiness came from his discovery of God almost everywhere he looked. And almost all of his poetry is an ode to this expansive, always unfolding of the good and holy God. Last night, I wasn't quite finished with my sermon. And I was wondering what I was going to do with it because it's a little strange one today. And I had a dream. And I had a dream about Gerard Manley Hopkins. I know that's weird. That's really weird. But I dreamed I was reading a book of his poetry. And I had to get up early this morning and finish and rewrite the end of this talk because of that dream. And one poem I saw in my sleep was one entitled, "As Kingfishers Catch Fire." And honestly, I don't know what the poem means. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because it keeps me interested and it keeps me searching. And another was "The Starlight Night." And that seemed appropriate since I had all these ghostwriters on my mind for this week. I'll leave these words with you as a benediction. As kingfishers catch fire and dragonflies draw flame, keep the grace that keeps all grace going. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, in limbs and in eyes and the features of men's faces. This world is charged with the grandeur of God. Look to the stars. Look up at the skies. Look at all the fire folk sitting in the air. Thee, God, I come from, to Thee, God, I go. All day long like a fountain flows. I have life still before me and Thy purpose still to fulfill. The debt of love yet. Help me, sir, and I will. And God's people say,